Hello everyone. So as the title indicates, this is a video mainly for those who have appeared in mains 2025 and were not able to crack mains. But is it only for them? No, not really. Even those who have not even appeared in a single mains can still watch this video. You can understand the reasons why people would normally fail in mains. This can also help you be in a state of preparedness so as to avoid such failures in the upcoming year's mains, right? So there are some 5 or 6 different dimensions regarding mains which I have to discuss, and that's what I have written here, as you can see here on the slide. So first, let me address with the basic question: did you really have certain main specific skills in you or not, right? So this is for GS. For GS, I feel that there are certain skill sets that you should have developed during your course of preparation. It's time now you start questioning whether you really have those skills or not. If not, take steps to develop those skills. All right. So what are those 5 specific main skills for GS? First, can you really catch the tone of the question? Okay, in every GS paper, I would say that at least 5 questions, 4 to 5 questions in every single GS paper, they have a certain nuance, they have a certain depth to it, right? It's not a plain bookish answer that you end up writing. Okay, there are of course easy questions. I would say 50% of the questions in every GS paper, 10 out of 20 questions are easy. But then what about the other 10? Out of that 5 questions, either they are very difficult to interpret, or they could be too factual that you may not even have heard about those facts, or they may be of the type where you need to really catch the pulse of the exam setter. You need to really understand the exact core demand of the question, else your answer would simply be written in a very deviated direction. Okay. And if you would want to really understand how UPSC makes 10 questions really challenging in mains, I have already made a video, and the link of which I'll be sharing in the comment as well as the description box. That's a video mainly to help you understand how UPSC makes mains questions difficult, right? What is the character of those 5 to 10 difficult mains questions asked in GS every single year? So do watch that. You get an idea as to what type of questions to expect in next year's mains, so that even when you do your daily answer writing practice, you actually factor those type of variation of questions in your mind and you do your answer writing. Simply otherwise what happens is most students, they keep on writing answers for easy, straightforward questions. Of course, you will handle that, but how do you handle other 5 to 10 questions is what matters. So the first skill that you need for your mains, to crack mains with a really good margin, at least 40 to 50 marks more than the mains cutoff of your category, is you need to really know what is the examiner expecting from you. Okay, and let me teach you all those requirements of these 5 skills from GS paper 2 of CSE Mains 2025. Just from this year's GS paper 2 alone, let's do this introspection so that you can also easily relate to this year, right? So look at this very first question asked in GS paper 2 this year. This was the very first question. As soon as you open, you have this question. The first part of this question is actually easy to attempt. You only need to know what are corrupt electoral practices as given in RPA 1951. I think section 123 or 125, I'm not very sure. Out of these two, one of the section will talk about what are all the different corrupt practices. So if you know what are they, using religious identification to get votes and using bribery to influence voters, creating enmity between class of voters, right? So these would all come under corrupt electoral practices. You need to know those specifics. So assuming that if you have gone to mains, you would have prepared to the extent that you actually know the factual details of corrupt electoral practices. So I assume that you are good with that. So that can actually help you handle 20 to 30% of the question. Now what about the remaining 70% of the question? The remaining 70% of the question is not straightforward, right? Let me tell you what is this remaining 70%. The remaining 70% is it time that we start considering the property jump that we see with MLAs, MPs, right? Once they become MLA, MP or ministers, we see a huge jump in their property net asset worth, right? Should this jump itself be a sufficient ground for disqualifying these MLAs and MPs from contesting next elections or not? That is the question here. Okay, so basically, this is one dimension that has never has been asked in any of the previous years' mains. But does it mean that it is actually an area that cannot have been prepared at all? No, not really. That brings us to the second point. How correct were you in identifying what sources to read, what areas to read, right? Were you really certain about the correctness of the material that you have read? or is it simply because everybody in the market reads it and you also wanted to read that, right? So answering for these two questions, let me show you a resource which I keep on recommending in almost all the classes whenever I handle elections. There is one standard resource that I recommend, which is 255th report of Law Commission on Electoral Reforms. So this is one report. I have always insisted on students completely reading this. Every year at least 1 or 2 questions from elections are asked, and definitely this one report alone is going to shape your mind, it shapes your thinking to figure out, to cherry pick ideas and manage any kind of question asked on this particular topic, even though it could be a new question that never had a precedent in the past. All right. So let me show you. This is 255th report on Law Commission on Electoral Reforms. Chapter 2 talks, it's a big chapter for 40, 50 pages. It's only about role of money in elections. That is campaign financing during elections, right? The very opening of this chapter, it talks about the need for election finance reform. And when you read this part, just read what it says. First, it is undeniable fact that financial superiority translates into electoral advantage, and so richer candidates and parties have a greater chance of winning elections, right? And when you read all of these Supreme Court judgment, what has it said about money power in elections? When you read all these context, all these content related to this context, it shapes you, it gives you perspectives, it gives you understanding that how drastic is the role of money supply, money power in influencing the winnability of a candidate. That idea is what you have to write here. If you have written on corrupt electoral practice as the first part, then you talk about the influence that money can have in deciding the winnability of a candidate. You are actually done with 40 to 50% of your question, right? Next, you start giving your opinion, right? The opinion should be balanced in the sense, just because a MLA or MP's asset has increased, what if he had been a very shrewd businessman? Not necessarily that he would have been corrupt and he could have earned such money, correct? And in this country now of ours, unless you are really proven guilty, you are not considered to be guilty, right? So our jurisprudence is based on such clear standards. So simply because your asset value has increased, do you really feel that that itself should be a ground for bringing that under corrupt electoral practice or not? That is the demand of the question, right? You have to argue as to why you are presumed to be innocent until you are proven guilty, and so hence you cannot make such presumptions as to the guilt and end up disqualifying a candidate simply because his assets have increased, right? What about our enforcement agencies? Are they robust enough? Are they independent enough? Don't you think that will become a tool to only target members from opposition parties? Don't you think all these risks are there? So it is all these aspects that should be brought in, right? The question is analyze whether, okay, this is what is called as an analysis. You're talking about the negative aspects associated with increase in asset worth. Definitely that distorts the level playing ground between the candidates when fighting elections. No doubt about that. But at the same time, don't you think it can become a tool for political vendetta? It can only be used as a tool to selectively target opposition MLAs and leave your own MLAs, right? So these aspects, when they are brought into this answer, is what actually addresses the tone of the question. Whereas most aspirants would simply write about all the different features of corrupt electoral practice. They'll talk about disqualification provisions, though it is not at all asked. So if you're doing this, you have not really understood the tone of the question. And why have you not understood the tone of the question? Because your reading has been a restricted reading. You have not read from all these sources. Your reading is not wide enough to even think that such an idea even exists to be brought in the answer, right? So this again brings us to the idea of the importance of a wider reading, which I would have almost insisted on every other mains video that I would have made. So these two skills you should be having. One is the skill of exactly getting the tone of the question. That only comes when you read the right resources and not simply because somebody has suggested you a particular resource. You should be perfectly convinced about the suitability of this resource to handle a question without any precedent in the past, right? Is it like a universal source, not a limited source? You know, when you can identify all of that, you have the 2 skills that you require out of the 5 skills for GS, right? And what are the other skills? You need to be in a position to anticipate areas, right? For example, there was a question asked on governance this year. This question is simply about technology in governance. But what aspect of technology? About user interface, right? About the usability of government websites, usability and accessibility of government portals. How convenient and comfortable is it to access government websites? So basically it's talking about technology user interface. That is the question that was asked this year, right? But you should have anticipated that this area seems to be more of focus by UPSC. Why? Because a similar question was asked last year, right? They asked about interactive service model, so which is actually again about user and tech government website interface. So this is one area that you should be able to pick up, right? Even the question was about interactive service model last year. If you are a cautious aspirant, if you are smart enough, you should have picked up this idea that tech and user interface seems to be focused by UPSC, and preparing for that could have helped you handle a similar question on similar area this year, right? So your ability to anticipate areas based on PYQs, based on current affairs. Joe Biden's pardoning powers this year, preemptive pardons given by Joe Biden, was actually asked as a question, right? Trump's mad policies on protectionism, right? That was asked in GS paper 3. So it's only when you are in a position to anticipate and look forward as to what kind of questions can be expected this year from your own understanding, you actually have the third skill required for handling GS. All right. Next is ability to create content that sounds relevant, because there are questions where you have to write for 2.5 pages minimum. Okay, and exactly these are questions where points cannot come to your help. It is only your narrating ability. It's only your ability to conjure up content, create content, right? It should not be monotonous. It should not be boring. But at the same time, it should not be very deviant from the core demand of the question. See, the challenging part of a question like this is, though the question is very long, the core demand of the question is, is it time we balance judicial independence and judicial accountability? These are two contradicting ideas, right? Is it time we balance it? Why could this question be asked? We have a judge in Delhi. He called the fire services to put out a fire that has broken in his home, right? And when the fire service came to his home, they were able to spot bundles of cash burnt, correct? So crores and crores of money were got from his home in a burnt state. That shows that the judges are unsupervised, right? There is a risk with judges not being made accountable in the name of judges' independence being maintained. So that is the idea. That's the core nucleus around which this entire answer has to be constructed. It's very difficult to stretch this content for 1.5 pages. And this entire narrative here given about constitutional morality is, after all, an introduction point. And not only that, it actually gives you assistance to take your answer forward. What is constitutional morality? If constitutional text is very clear, there is no need for any dilemma. But in areas where the constitution is silent or it's not loud enough, in that case, it's all up to the individuals who put the constitution to work. It's about them, how we behave. Do we have any morals and core ethics and all that, right? So how should ethics, how should morality be the guiding force behind balancing judicial accountability with judicial independence? And trust me, creating an answer for 2.5 pages is a very tough task. It requires very good writing ability. It requires a decent command with English. Only then you can actually write an answer for this question, right? So as you can see here, there are 4 questions in just one paper in GS paper 2, where simply content alone cannot save you, right? All of these skills should be there. And again, there's a question on international relations. This was the most difficult question among the IR questions that I saw. India-Africa digital partnership is achieving mutual respect, co-development and long-term institutional partnership. Elaborate, right? It's not India-Africa partnership. It's a very limited area on digital partnership. Okay. So assuming that we all know that it could probably be about CoWIN and UPI and Aadhaar technology, experience sharing, and helping Africa also come up with these kind of mechanisms, that would possibly be it, right? You don't need to talk about exactly how is this cooperation achieved and all that. That's not the demand of the question. The demand of the question is more testing of your narrating ability. you need to talk about how Indo-Africa relationship is filled with respect for each other. We don't go to Africa to create anarchy or to put African nations into a debt trap of India's and then seize concessions as much as possible. That's not how we approach Africa, unlike that of China. Right? The debt diplomacy of China is always for gaining a further economic stronghold on the African markets, but that's not how India approaches Africa. Right? It's that aspect of mutual respect. It's that aspect of wanting Africans also to develop alongside with India. We have a lot of student exchange programs that we do. Why? We want those developing nations in Africa because they are also nations who have been earlier colonized and who are trying to decolonize themselves now. So India, we take the leadership of those erstwhile colonized countries and we help develop all other nations. So it is this writing ability, it is this narrating ability which you should have, right? So did your answer address these three aspects or not properly? Okay, so this is again less to do with content. Okay, so I would say that the remaining 10 to 12 questions may be very content rich, maybe content oriented. Okay, if you can deliver good content for those questions, so can others as well. But only a certain set of people can deliver the right answer, deliver the answer that impresses a UPSC examiner for these questions. Right? So 4 to 5 questions in every paper requires you to have a certain specific skill set. Okay, so I hope I have given you some idea about what that is. You need to catch the exact core demand and tone of the question. In 2019, right, there was a very nice question. It was a question that talks about federal supremacy, harmonious construction. Right, when you see GS paper 2, there was a question on federal supremacy and harmonious construction. Right, 90% of those who wrote mains could not even understand what that question is. Okay, but let me tell you, every year there are people who can still attempt those questions, that 10%. Okay, so be one among those 10%. And how does that happen? When your reading is correct, when you know what to read, when you know how deep to go into it. Right, is this the only way you could have cleared mains? No. If you have got extraordinary score in optional, that can actually offset your deficiency in all these areas. But did you get that there? That brings us to the next part of our discussion on perfecting your optional preparation. Many aspirants, after 2 or 3 years of optional preparation, they tend to assume that they are good with their option. Right? Whatever optional it could be. Just because you have invested time, just because you have made a lot of notes, automatically doesn't mean that you have become good with your optional. Okay, and let me tell you, 70% of the questions in optional, they are repetitions of previous year's questions. I think in optional there are only limited questions, limited areas around which UPSC has to ask questions. Right, so 70% of the questions in optional, they do have repetitions and reflections from past years. But again, that remaining 30%, right? So let's say in an optional question, you have 1, 2, 3, okay? And first question you have A, B, C. These are 3 sub questions. A and B are from previous years. A and B are from topics that you have normally prepared from your books. But this one question in every question is slightly tricky. It is slightly demanding. It is very challenging to even understand exactly what is to be delivered as an answer for that question. But don't you think, if you go down in every single question, let's say you are short by 3 marks compared to the best performer in that question. So just from one question, you have lost 3 to 4 marks. Similarly, with the other question, you lose 3 to 4 marks, which means around 20 to 25 marks in one paper of your optional is lost. Same in the other paper of your optional. So around 40 to 50 marks you lose simply because you are not deep enough. What do I mean by depth? See, let me talk about my optional subject. In the sense, when students approach me with assistance regarding history and when I talk to them about their performance in the latest year 2025 mains, the usual conventional type of question, they would have given a good answer. But the question, whichever question I felt really challenging, when I asked them for what did you write as an answer for those questions, that is where the answer that they give seems to be totally deviant. Why? Their reading is only geared towards an optional paper that is totally easy. Right? Why? It's a lazy preparation. It's an unimaginative preparation. It's a shallow preparation. Only from known areas, only from known resources, only answers for previous year's questions. You are not going anywhere beyond. right? You are not deepening because it takes a lot of efforts. It's very easy to read the same books again and again and again, but for optional, you get to excel, to get into 290, to get into 300 range of score in your optional paper, you have to be the best in India. If not, at least you should be the best among your friends group, at least your friends group who are all attempting mains. If you feel that whatever nature of question is being asked, if you are the one who's able to give the most meaningful of the answers, I would say that is a very necessary ingredient to score good in your optional paper. Some people develop it after 4 or 5 attempts because of attempting umpteen number of tests everywhere, reading a lot of resources. But I would ask you to be a little proactive, develop that advantage over your immediate circles at least, right? You do not know who else is there in Delhi who is well prepared, even better than you with your optional, but at least in among your friends group, if you happen to be having an edge over others in terms of the depth of preparation, right, I would say that you are actually on the right track. So introspect. Can you claim to be the best among all known associates of yours when it comes to your optional subject? If not, take time. You have one more attempt. You have another 8 more months, right? There is time. So start deepening. Don't get into the same trap and cycle again of reading the same material, same limited content, making mindless notes again and again, or simply attempting answers for previous year's questions. No, get imaginative. Think about what more areas even exist. If you know they exist, you will actually be inclined to prepare. It's a nature of human mind to go for the unknown, right? But the point is, you do not even know those areas exist. That is why your optional strength is not so good. All right. So try to achieve perfection in optional, and the only indication is being the best among every known person of yours. Second, are you adding more to the reading of your optional? Have you really increased the quantum of what you have read? Okay, compared to the 2025 attempt, when you give your next attempt in 26, at least I should see a 40 to 50% jump in the quantum of content you have read for your optional. Some new content. Explore. There is always a lot more to read. The more and more reading goes into optional, better scores you will get. See, I'll talk about my subject, which is actually history. Every year, only those with history optional, with history as a subject of graduation, right, they are the ones who get into 300 plus range and all that. It could be Shruti Sharma, who got All India rank 1, or it could be Nausheen, All India rank 9. They are all actually graduates in history. I'm not saying only a history graduate can get those scores. Not really. Even Dharani from Tamil Nadu, who got into IAS Odisha cadre, she got 290 marks in history option. She was a dentist, so she did not have history as a subject of graduation. But how was that made possible? 4 or 5 years of preparation, 4 or 5 years of widening the sources that they have read. If instead you were to simply confine yourself to very minimal amount of reading, that perfection in optional is never going to be achieved. All right, and that will keep pulling you down all the time. Right? You need to have a certain command over your mains performance. That command comes when all of these skills are intact in your GS. So that all 20 questions, and at least 19 out of 20 questions, you are better than others. Similarly, in optional as well, you are much better than others in preparedness, in delivery, in your writing skill, all of that. Do not be too much obsessed about your writing skill. Students keep on writing answers after answers after answers, not thinking about what if these areas do not even get asked in the upcoming year. So think about what more can be asked. That only happens when you take a new additional book, when you're reading through it, you will understand, oh, this is an area I have never even known that it exists. And then you will automatically start preparing for that. Okay. So that should be the goal in aiming for perfection when it comes to optional preparation. So let's move on to the next part. Lot of students spend a lot of time making mindless data. Okay. They hope that these data, these templates will all be useful on the day of the exam. I know aspirants who do not clear a single mains, but they have made bundles and bundles of content. So much of facts and statistics. Poverty, 10 different facts. Unemployment, 10 different data. Correct? My question is, it's waste of time. So why would you do that if you know certain realities about how questions are asked in mains? Usually it's for economy, where students collect all these facts and data. Correct? But look at how question was asked this year. Out of the 4 questions asked in economy, in GS paper 3, 4 out of 20 questions are asked from economy. Right? Only 4 questions after all. And in these 4 questions, I'll tell you, you cannot use any facts or data in first, second, and third question. Maybe since production link incentive is a common theme for a couple of years, your facts that you have collected may come to your rescue in this question. But in the other three questions, I'll tell you, the main challenge faced by students in the other three questions is even to know what is fiscal health index. Only somebody who have read April 2025 current affairs could have actually known this new index that was released by Niti Aayog, right? Otherwise, you cannot even take this answer forward. So all the data that you have collected on fiscal deficit, prudence, and all of that actually doesn't matter much unless you know the basis of this index, unless you know the components of this index. Same is the case with the first question. It is also more terminology oriented, right? Differentiate between HDI and adjusted HDI, inequality adjusted HDI, right? So here the concept is more important than facts or data about human development index and all of that, right? So for a paper like economy, where there is a possibility of using a lot of data, even for such a paper, if you cannot really use data except for one question, then what's the point of collecting volumes of data and keeping it and mindless collection of data? So come out of that, right? Instead, again, it takes us to our first principle as to identify sources to read, keep an eye on important developments in current affairs, develop a healthy habit of reading newspaper. Most aspirants I see here now during the time of interview preparation, they are all aspirants who at least have been reading 2 newspaper editorials at least, the serious ones, right? If that is the case, those are more important than simply following somebody else's strategy and keeping with you a handy set of some 20-30 different facts and data. Waste of time, right? And similarly, essay templates as well. Students keep on preparing a lot of templates without developing their authenticity, without developing their original spark of creating content, right? They don't read much. Instead, they would want to do shortcuts. They simply look at previous year's questions and toppers' answers. Just pick and choose some data, some points for essay. But let me tell you, most of these questions asked in this year's essay paper, section A, there were 4 questions, out of which you have to write 1, right? First, second, third, none of this is actually related to any previous year's questions. Okay, maybe best lessons are learned through bitter experience. This is also easy. Anyway, you can understand this quote easily. You can take this answer forward. But the other 3 questions here, they are not related to any of the previous year questions. This is the first time when a question on war is actually asked. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And why was it asked? Because of Operation Sindoor, because of the attack that happened in Pahalgam. Could be that in the context why a question was actually asked about war, right? It is actually more easier to anticipate a potential area from where an essay question can be asked than to go and prepare templates after templates for some familiar themes. Students generally do that. 20-25 themes are given as a list by somebody. They just go and prepare content for that. Instead, why can't you simply think, keep your eyes open as to what is happening around you? Based on that, can some ideas be inspired to ask a question on in essay paper or not? When you have that kind of an awareness, you are more prepared rather than a cut copy paste job that you do. Most aspirants would do this cut copy paste job instead of genuine transformation and a genuine curiosity enhancement, right? So the buzzword here is curiosity and not storage. You are not expected to be a hard disk. You are supposed to be an artificial intelligent or a really intelligent human being. Okay, so leave all these templates and frameworks. I don't believe in their efficacy at any point of time since my days of preparation till now. They can only be useful if you have all other foundations intact, if you know how to interpret a question, if you have the awareness, only then you can even start this answer and write some meaningful data. So I would say this data by itself does not add any value. Instead, you can become a person of value by developing other main specific skills. All right. So now the next aspect is about essay. How well did you handle your essay? What was the intent behind your question selection? Is it simply because it was very familiar to earlier question that you have attempted in your test series? Is that the reason why you have simply gone for a question? Or was it really connecting to you? Did it really connect to you from your life experience? And is that why you have gone for a particular question? Right? And many students, as soon as they start writing, they first start with the introduction. No, that's not the way to write. You have to first create an idea about all the content that you're going to put in the essay. And after you have mastered all the content, then it's time to frame a very broad general introduction. Your introduction should not be a very specific narrow story, a very specific narrow aspect of this whole topic of this essay, right? So how broad was your introduction? What good practices can be seen in your essay? Let's say you transition from one page to the other page. Did you maintain the continuity of flow? Or when you wrote 2 paragraphs, and if the 2 paragraphs were connected, did you bring in some meaningful transition opening sentence in the second paragraph to make it tethered to the first paragraph or not, right? And did you actually give a slight change in direction to your essay, or did it simply travel in one direction alone, right? Did you give a pre-conclusion? Did you show that you are aware of the other side as well to the examiner, right? So all of these aspects, they determine how well you would have performed your essay. It's not your gut feel that you were able to manage some content for your question. No, it's about why did you choose a topic. It's about how broad was your introduction. It was about all the good practices. What kind of figure of speech did you incorporate in your essay, right? Did you innovate? Did you spontaneously come up with a nice quote or not? Do you have the skill to do that in the first place or not, right? And did you avoid any deviations in your essay? All of these aspects have to be now introspected. It's simply just not about whether you have finished 10 pages of content or not, correct? Only when all of this is addressed, it means that you actually know how to score well in essay paper. If these aspects are not addressed, your failure in essay keeps on repeating year after year after year. All right. So now it's time we start introspecting about ethics paper. And you need to understand certain challenges which are very specific to ethics paper. First, you need to understand that time is going to be really short. Or did you really perceive that time will be short in ethics paper when you attempted your ethics? Right? If you're not conscious of time, you would not have given correct importance to properly reading case studies. Right? You would have tried to trivialize the case studies. You would have not factored all the conditionalities and layers and nuances given in those case studies. They're all given for a reason. But if you were not very conscious of time and time management, this aspect actually gets affected, right? So let's say there's a case study that's given, right? You are a collector in a Naxal affected district, and it's a rainy night, and when you're going in your official car, and an accident takes place in a Naxal affected area, and you have a dilemma now. Either you have to tend to that dying man, or you have to rush to your superior's call. What would you do, right? Here you see a Naxal area is a layer, a rainy night is another layer, okay? And your superior wanting to immediately have a meeting with you is another layer, right? If you actually patiently read, when you start writing an answer, you will factor in all these conditionalities. You will not ignore some, and you will not selectively only answer a few of them in your answer. But if you are running out of time when you approach your case studies, what happens is you end up trivializing case studies, because it's human mind to just absorb the core message of the case study, and with the core message you start working your answers. So then what happens is the number of dilemmas that you are actually expected to bring out in your case study, it actually goes down. You are not actually addressing the question as it is given there. Instead, you are addressing it as how you have understood from that. Why does it happen? Because you were not managing time properly. And why would I say that time management is very crucial in ethics paper? Simply because in essay, you are given a quote, and you're given 90 minutes to write for 1000 words, around 10 pages. But in essay paper, you are given 3 quotes. Each one of them is for, I think, 10 marks, which means you write for 150 words. Right, you're writing 450 words of 3 different complex essay quote, but just with 21 or 22 minutes, correct? So which means that you have to work twice as fast when you write the ethics quotes compared to your essay, right? So your ethics quotes would have consumed time. If you were not very clear about how well to allocate time between normal philosophical answers and then coming to quote-based answers and then coming to case studies, if you do not know how to allocate time between these 3 areas, you would have somewhere neglected the importance that should have been given in addressing case studies. You may not even realize that. And you will only keep on realizing that, you keep on finding that your ethics score does not increase at all. Why is it not increasing? Because this could be one of the factors, right? And many times when I see ethics answers of students, I simply find definitions after definitions being dumped. Okay, it could be a question on emotional intelligence, and there could be 2 or 3 parts to the question. But what I find in the answer is a collection of definitions, a collection of ideas. But I feel it's more like a jump from one sentence to the other sentence. I don't feel a connect in the every idea that actually follows. So I would say that many students, when they, let's say there's a question on integrity, right? They give a good definition of integrity. Then they say, how is integrity useful, right? And they even talk about how in administration integrity can help you, and why is it necessary that civil servants should be men of integrity. All of that is fine. But do you really bring in some philosophers or some thinker, and how do they view integrity? Do you actually bring about the challenges to a person remaining integral throughout his career and his life, right? How personality influences integrity. You know, the connecting links for that core idea of a question, it simply is ignored altogether. Why? Because they have not thought on these lines. Students, they only think on a definition, a linear narrative is what they think about, because that is how it's given in books, right? You do not think about other connected aspects of this particular idea. As a result of which, what happens is, it's always a certain kind of a template flow that I find in students' answers. I feel the ethics answers are either definitions and some 2 or 3 bookish ideas given. There is no creative interconnections that I'm able to. There is no creative incorporation of some new angle or a new perspective that I normally a person would not have read in textbooks. Okay, so that is also another important reason why you may go low in ethics paper. And lastly, English. Students who perform well in essay will always perform well in ethics. Both these papers are philosophical, abstract ideas that you are trying to explain and clarify to the reader. So good the English skills are, better the English skills are, better will be your scores in ethics paper, right? So have a strategy for time management. That comes only by attending full test ethics papers and understanding this shortcomings and problems, right? And once you have a strategy for time management, you will end up giving due attention for case studies, equal attention for all the 4 or 5 different questions on case studies, without missing out on the essentials that are actually mentioned. Why should all the nuances be mentioned otherwise? So that you factor in all those nuances when you make a decision. You cannot trivialize it in the name of simplifying the case study, right? But it actually happens, right? So what happens is, it, after all, every case study when I read of students, it becomes a case of what is written in law versus unwritten personal morality. So the dilemma is always reduced to what is in written law versus what is not written, and where you have to act as per your discretion. Is that the only dilemma that actually exists in all the case studies? Why do you feel like that? Because you're not able to factor in, and you're not able to engage all the different conditionalities that are given in the case study. And why does it happen? Because of improper time management, because of your haste, because of your hurriness, right? So that's why time management is important. Next, again, wider reading for ethics gives you more interconnections. It gives you more perspectives on a very common idea. It could be such a simple idea as integrity, but something that you are able to bring in, others should not be able to bring in. Correct? That is the goal of ethics preparation. And lastly, it's a general suggestion. It's a general improvement. If your English, if your language skills improve, automatically your ethics handling will also improve. All right. So what is the remedy? Right. Creative content preparation. Today is the age of AI. The competition has just got difficult. There are so much use cases of how AI can be put to thinking of areas to prepare for gray areas like governance, or it could be society, right? Or it could be for ethics, right? Earlier you have to go and hunt for materials, but now if you only can imagine how to ask the right prompt, okay, and that comes from your deep thinking about the nature of questions being asked in mains, what more areas are yet to be asked, right? You have a syllabus sheet. When you look at the syllabus sheet and when you look at PYQs, you're able to understand some areas are asked, some areas are not yet explored to a greater degree. And if you know those areas where your attention should focus. You can ask the right prompt to AI, and AI can actually show you the areas to prepare more. Correct? So that is what I mean by creative content preparation. And exhaustive content preparation is, once you have identified the areas, spend some time. It could be 1 day or it could be 2 days. Do not be in a hurry to read 2 pages per topic. Instead, spend 2 days or a couple of days at least, so that slowly you get into the depths. It actually builds one layer after the other. It's only when you have done sufficient amount of reading, now new set of questions come to your mind, and now you are in search of answers for these new set of questions. So this process has to go on in a very in a very slow manner, right? So content preparation is about the width of areas that you need to cover. This is just a talent. I would say it more than talent. It's about your efforts that you put in analyzing previous year's questions, finding out yet to be asked areas, and how well are you able to prepare further from there, right? Use AI, it can definitely help you. And when it comes to exhaustion of content, once you have identified the area, now spend time, right? It could be going to the sources, right? When you ask AI to give you reading content, also ask it to give the sources from where AI is giving you the content. That way, you'll also get to know from where you have to go to the original documents and read it. It is time consuming, but it is definitely worth the while. It's only those who have prepared like that could have actually handled a law commission's report. It could have taken 3 or 4 days to completely exhaust it. But the minute you are prepared with this law commission's report, every single question asked in elections in any year can be attempted. That is what I call as a powerful, stable, certain, comprehensive preparation, right? And PYQ, correct guidance, what is that? Many students who are into their mains preparation, they write answers, and after they write answers, they look at some answer banks, right? You have so many such market resources of answers, template answers, and it is even sold in the name of toppers, handwritten notes for previous year's questions, correct? And when I saw that, I was really shocked. Only for the easy, straightforward questions, the answers given in these answer banks are actually correct. Wherever the questions are a little challenging and tricky, most of the answer banks have simply copied some useless answer and they have written there. So for a normal aspirant, for somebody who is not really sure about their methods, if you're not sure about your interpretation, what would you do? After writing your answer, you look into the answer bank and you will feel that, oh my God, my answer is totally wrong. And now you start thinking that this is actually correct. And let me tell you, many of these answer banks, they have very incorrect, very wrong answers. That's why you need correct guidance. You need to know the right person to ask for to help you interpret a very tricky, difficult question asked in many of the years, right? Every year, at least 2 to 3 questions would be of that category. So if you're handling PYQs of the last 10 years, definitely there are 30 to 40 questions, and it is these questions, these tricky questions, which actually open up your mind. And it is the training from these previous years' tricky questions that actually show you new avenues to prepare for, correct? So that's important. And somebody who really helps you rightly interpret the most challenging of the previous year's questions, not the simple ones. What is global warming, or what is aurora australis, aurora borealis, right? These are all factual. You don't need anybody's assistance. But a question like polity questions, the question I told you, GS paper 2, 2019, right? The question on federal supremacy, harmonious construction, I'm very sure most answer banks also will have incorrect answers. Okay, it is handling those questions and training you for that where correct guidance matters a lot. And strengthening English skills, lot of ways to do that, starting with a regular habit of reading Hindu paper, trying to write a summary of whatever you read from Hindu paper on a daily basis. Daily, at least 1 page of content writing, creative writing. Write like how newspaper editors write. That's the benchmark that you have to strive to increase yourself to, right? And slow essay improvement, okay? Understanding all the fundamentals of essay writing, try to bring in all the best practices in your essay writing from now onwards. Do not forget your essay paper until your next year's mains test series. Many aspirants who keep on failing in mains would do this unhealthy habit of ignoring essay paper until the next year's test series when they enroll in. Do not do that. Try to bring in one good practice, one great practice that toppers incorporate in their essay writing every single month. At least you'll have 10 great practices that you would have brought in as a part of your routine essay writing, right? And have a 10-month optional deepening target. What I mean is, go explore a lot of books, at least make sure you read 40 to 50% more content for the next year's 2026 mains optional. Do not stick on to the same content. All right. And understand competition, right? If you want to be the best of the best, if you want to get into IAS, if you want to get into your own home cadre, everything should be flawless. Your execution is supposed to be not short of anybody else in India, right? You aim for that, you will definitely make it to the top ranks. All right. So I hope I've given you some insights, given you some benchmarks to evaluate yourself and to introspect about what went wrong or what did not work well for you in this mains. I'll see you in subsequent sessions as well. Thank you.